The Stage Door Show, celebrating the independent artist. With your host, Dave Hondel.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Stage Door Show tonight. This is Dave Hondel. You're listening to us on iHeartRadio. We have a great guest with us tonight, Chris Weatherman. You'll remember him from the show Alone, and he was in the first season of that in Vancouver Island, which we'll get into, but he's also an accomplished writer, and he has a new book out, so we're going to talk about that as well. So please welcome to the show, Chris Weatherman. Chris, thanks for being with us, man.
Thanks for having me, brother. Good to be here. Appreciate it.
Appreciate that. You know, and before I get to your book and your writings, I know you're an accomplished writer and so forth, but, you know, I got to get into being a survivalist because, you know, for 40 years, you told me before we started recording that you've done this type of, I don't know if it's, to me, I respect it because, you know, I grew up in Minnesota and just being outside for 15 minutes, you know, I'm back in. I respect the hell out of you for being, you know, out on your own. And for the show, for those of you who haven't seen it, if I remember correctly, they put you out in a remote area, and the goal is what, 21 days or 3 weeks that you have to survive.
No, the goal was last man standing.
It could be even further than that.
But yeah, and it went way further than that. So
yeah. Talk about that experience about being on that show, because I mean, you know, for us, you know, the common watchers of this, I mean, we couldn't imagine doing that, what you do. And so where do you get that fortitude to be able to do stuff like that?
Oh, it's, you know, a lot of people possess that inner drive to test themselves, you know, and that's really all this was, that I wanted to go see if I could do it. And for season one in particular, we were the beta, you know, we were the test.
Right.
And we helped them flesh out their plans. You know, we worked with them quite a bit. We found holes and contingencies as we moved on when they were actually needed. But you know, the first season, guys, that was the purest essence of that show, because when we were like, I think the day before they inserted us, they gathered us all together and said that there was a $500,000 prize. We didn't even know that. We were like, what?
Oh, really? You didn't know that?
We were all doing it just to do it. And there was no animosity. And I think Alone kind of keeps that all the way through, is that the people that go on, they're not competing against one another. This is a solo competition. You're competing against yourself,
right? Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
And season one, I can vouch for, was Alone. They dropped you off, they left. That was it.
But now you have camera guys there.
You
film it yourself.
We filmed it ourselves. They put us through a crash course boot camp on you know, videography and all kinds of stuff, and you know, telling us how to frame shots, set shots. We went through the whole sequence of it, you know, and they kept stressing to us, you know, if you didn't film it, it didn't happen. And so the thing was to always have the cameras running, Man,
Chris, that blows my mind, because I always, you know, just being in production myself, I'm like, you know, they got to have a camera guy with them, and you know, he probably goes to the hotel, and you know. Yeah, you just blew my mind right now.
We had a Pelican case. We had a Pelican case full of some camera gear, lots of memory cards, tons of batteries, and the power packs to recharge batteries. And they would come periodically and collect the cards and drop off new ones.
Sure.
And you probably wouldn't even see them, you know, because wherever your stash was for your camera gear, they knew where it was, and they would just go there and take what they needed, leave what they had, and bounce. You know, unless they were coming out to do med checks, which I'd never experienced because I wasn't there that long, sadly. But I don't have any regrets. It was an amazing experience, and we did it on Quatsino tribal lands in Vancouver. And the Quatsino people were so good to us. They were such amazing. They threw us a big dinner where the youth of the tribe got together in full regalia.
Wow.
And did dances and drumming and stuff for us. And it was fantastic. And at the end of it, the tribal elder stood up and said he wanted to thank us for coming to his land to do this, because our presence reignited the fire in their youth to learn their history and their ways and their traditions, and that all the costumes that everybody was wearing were made specifically for this event. They didn't even have them. Wow. They're like, we made these to do this for you guys, and we're going to keep this going now, because it's rekindled the flame in the tribe.
I can see that happening. I mean, what an incredible, And then just the other question I had, now you might be in one location, they drop you off, but
Yeah.
there's several other people. So, or maybe not several, but 3 or 4. What?
Well, 10.
Well, it was 10. So, I mean,
Yeah.
but where do are they placed around you?
Oh, we were separated over a very large geographical region, and in
Okay.
each camp basically that they picked had physical barriers that would be very difficult to overcome
Sure.
to get out of your area into somebody else's. And we had to carry some equipment with us, so they always knew our location. And if they could tell that two of us were getting close, this thing we could text from it and receive a text from it through SAT. Which I never did, but
Right.
they would send you a message and be like, "Hey, you need to turn around," and which I don't even know if it ever happened, but we did have that kind of equipment with us, and so they could monitor location. And if you were static for too long, like you'd get a message, like they'd be like, "Hey, are you okay?"
Right.
And be like, "Yeah, I'm doing this." They're like, "Okay."
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, that's cool. And then, this is a question I've always wanted to ask. So I'm so happy you're on the show tonight because, I'm a very picky eater, right? I'm a very picky eater. I don't even eat onions, Chris. Like that's how picky I am. So when you have no choice but to kill your food, whatever, cook it.
Yeah.
I mean, are you ever worried that you're going to get some kind of salmonella or whatever from eating not undercooked or
there's
just
the
something
key.
that you don't normally would eat, right?
You just said the key. And so so like let's take Quasino and Alan in particular. He was pretty famous for his love of slugs, banana slugs in particular. He ate by the pound up there. But there's things you would do. You understand that certain species of animals carry parasites, what kind of parasites they carry and how to deal with them. So you would want to purge these things first. And then the key to not making yourself sick with a foodborne illness in the wild, especially in a survival situation like this, to cook the hell out of everything, in particular, boil it. Yeah. So you boil pretty much everything. That's your basic way of cooking. And by boiling, you retain all the nutrients that food has to provide. Whereas grilling, some of it's dripping off into the fire, you're charring and losing stuff. Yeah. So when you boil it, you keep it all, and you will eat your food, and then you also drink that broth. You will get it all into your body.
Oh, sure.
And by boiling it and boiling it, that to that temp, and it kills anything that's in there. So I never experienced foodborne. I know he didn't either. Foodborne illness of any kind.
Sometimes you see that on the show. Maybe they don't understand what you need to do. But.
Well, it gets down to hygiene, and especially for like Naked and Afraid and stuff like that. The way that they put those guys out there and the environment that they're forced to operate in and what they have at their disposal makes it extremely difficult to maintain a sanitary condition. And that's just critical when you're out there. Clean hands are an important thing. I mean, you may not have soap, but hot water and a good scrubbing with sand, clean sand, is better than nothing. And you've got to be didiligent. So there's no laxing on that standard.
I respect the hell out of it. I mean, you and anybody else who does that. For 40 years though, what possessed you to want to do survive? I mean, survive, because I think it's great. Everybody should know some form of, survivalist, activity, because I mean, look, if you're lost on a hiking trip, or anybody could fall into that, that type of situation, and know just the basics. But what actually fascinated you about this, and how did you start doing it?
Well, I was a redneck kid growing up in the hinterlands of Florida, and I was of the generation where we went out of the house first thing in the morning, and we came back when the street lights came on.
But it was dark,
or in my case, it was when the sun started to dip, I was headed back to the house. But I'd leave my house first thing in the morning with a BB gun, a lighter, and a pocket knife, and I would be gone, and nobody knew where I was. My parents didn't. I mean, I was geofenced. It was like, don't go past here. But it was hundreds of acres that I ran it through, and that's where it started. It started out with primitive skills, learning, making tools, making baskets, collecting pine sap and making charcoal, and and making pitch out of that to seal a basket, and learning how to do that, and then heat rocks, drop them in, and put water in that basket, because with the pitch it's now waterproof, and heating rocks and dropping them in there to enough point to get that water to boil, and now that's safe to drink. It tastes like crap, but I know I can safely drink it. And that's what I was really into when I was a kid. and just over the years that just kind of advanced, and it sort of just kept going until like what I like to refer to as modern survival, with using some of the cool tools that we have at our disposal, but the skills and the knowledge, that's the important thing, because you can lose equipment. You can be in a position where you can't have any of your equipment with you, not even a blade, which I don't get dressed in the morning without having a blade on me. That's the first thing I put in my pocket is a knife. And the second thing I do is grab a flashlight, like this one hanging around my neck. There's another one in my pocket here. There's just things I do not operate without. I've got a lighter in my pocket. I've got a tourniquet in my pocket. I've got my stuff. So, and it's a mindset. It's a lifestyle that people are like, oh, I couldn't imagine living in that kind of fear. I'm like, I don't live in fear. I have zero fear.
That's what I was going to say. If you're prepared, you're not living in fear, right?
I'm ready to face what may come. And so it's I don't live in fear. I'll go anywhere at any time. It don't bother me. I'm good.
That's great. That's great, man. That's so great. And when I was a kid, we used to go pheasant hunting down in Iowa, and so. My stepdad would put me at the end of a cornfield, so I'm sitting there with my little rabbit 410 gun. What am I going to kill with that? And he's trying to push the birds down, and I'm like, I'm there by myself, and I'm like, okay, if he goes one way and he gets lost, I'm screwed. That's why I said I have a lot of respect for people who know where they are and who understand, like compasses and.
Well, I was just reaching for my watch. I was going to show you, but I took my watch off earlier. I have a what's called a Kaminga global needle compass. So no matter which hemisphere I'm in, it points north.
Really?
So it's a compass that and they're not as good as they act like they are, but they're still pretty damn good. But I also, in my ruck that lives in my truck, there's a very good Lensatic compass that I can do a lot of things with, and I have GPS units that I take with me, and multiple compasses. My personal survival kit's got another compass in it, so I probably have 3 to 4 of them on me when I'm in the woods at any given time.
So I mean, so being a survivalist for so many years, when did being an author really kind of when did you start like loving to write? Because I would just imagine that, being out there, you have all this time to kind of think of, stories, right? And things like that.
Yeah, but I am an accidental author, very accidental. And despite my best efforts, I've been very successful. Right. I wrote my first book my first book was called Going Home. It's book 1 of the Survivalist series, which the 12th book, Exploring Home, just released. But so there's 12 books in that series now, and I wrote that on a survival forum. At the time, I worked for a company. I did the security systems in jails and prisons around the country. I was outside lead sales
world myself.
Yeah. So I was outside lead sales, project manager, troubleshooter, kind of the whole thing, customer relations, all that stuff. And so I spent a lot of time in hotels, and I'm not the go sit in a bar kind of guy. And I'd rather get me a bottle of whiskey and sit in a hotel room. And I was on a survival forum, and I was reading stories in a fiction section that they had. And I was just like, some of these are cool, some of these are not so cool. And I'm like, but they're all like missing something for me. And I just, what the hell, I'm going to write one. And this was 2010.
Yeah.
And about the only books in that genre at the time were Patriots and One Second After. That was really it. You had to go back into the 70s to like William Johnstone, Out of the Ashes stuff to get anything else.
Right.
And so it was like that story that night was kind of like a lightning strike into the genre, honestly. And I'm not bragging because that's
like post-apocalyptic.
Post-apocalyptic, you could call it. Some people say dystopian, but I don't really write dystopian. I write more post-apocalyptic and survival, really. But I based off an EMP because I wanted to make the world as bad as I could, as fast as I could, and make it really hard on these characters. And it was a way of me wargaming. What would I do? How would I handle it? So the night I started writing, I had come home. I had been in Thomasville, Georgia, at the jail up there, and I had drove home. I lived down in North Central Florida. And so when I was sitting in my living room that night with my bottle of whiskey, it's 11:30 at night. Everybody's in bed. And I was like, I'm going to write this story. I'll just write a story. So I decided on an EMP, and I was like, well, I'm going to put this guy in Tallahassee because I just came through there today. I know this route like the back of my hand. I drive it all the time. And I know how he's going to come home. And I just started writing. And that first night I wrote like 5,000 words, which for a writer, that's a chunk, especially to do it in about 2 hours.
You get in that mode and you can't stop, right?
Just poured it out and posted it and went to bed. And so the next morning I'm getting up, and get my Crackberry out, and I go to the website, and there's just dozens and dozens and dozens of comments, and I was shocked by it. I was like, wow, all right. So it was the most fun that I've ever had in any of the, so I have 22 titles total. That one was the most fun. That one was by far, because I could tell what the readers were thinking, and I had immediate reaction, and just the interaction. And the book is kind of clunky in places because there's a lot of gear talk and things like that. But the only reason that that's there is because people were asking me questions of like, what would you use for this in that instant? And instead of answering it, I would just weave it into the story.
Weave it in. Yeah, for sure.
And so it ended up, when I finished it, it had over 2 million views online.
Wow.
Yeah, it was hot. And people were telling me to publish it. And I was like, I'm not going to publish this. I'm a writer. I'm like, here, I'll write you guys another one. And so I wrote my sequel on there. Started writing.
The first one was Going Home, right?
Going Home. The second one is called Surviving Home.
Okay. All right.
So they're all of them have home in the title, because that's the entire essence of this story is home. And so one of my friends on the website posted my PayPal account, and he's like, let's send him money. We'll make him do it. And people sent me like $4,000. And I was shocked. I was stunned.
Yeah,
and I didn't know nothing about it. And I still wasn't taking it serious. And I was like, okay,
yeah,
look, I'll get this thing made into a book, so you guys can get your copies if you want them. If you'll just leave me alone, I'll get this done. And so I had to add I wasn't taking it serious. I didn't.
Yeah,
it was right there, but I didn't see it. That was the thing. And
which is
so
probably good.
Yeah, it was. It was.
I could tell already. You're a grounded person. You know.
Yeah, I'm a stoic.
person,
I'm a stoic to the core, man. That's my entire vibe.
Tell. Yeah.
So I had it done. It was done very badly. The first edition, there's some of them out there. Actually, people pay thousands of dollars for those now. I wish I'd have known. God, I'd have kept cases of them. But I had it made into a book, and it got released. It hits Amazon, and even at the terrible rate that I was earning from the vanity press that I use, it's a terrible word in publishing to say vanity press. It made a quarter of my annual salary the first month it was on Amazon.
First month.
And I was like, first month. And I was like, whoa.
And what kind of marketing did you do? Did you have to do any marketing?
Zero. I didn't market. I've never marketed.
Wow.
Penguin did a couple of little marketing maneuvers for me, but so not much.
That was Penguin that published.
No, so I self-pubbed. It gets released and it's blowing up. And I was like, whoa, there is something to this. I'm like, all right, I'm going to start to take this a little more serious now.
Yeah.
And then Penguin Books called me and made an offer to me.
Oh, okay.
And I turned them down. And they were incredulous. They were like, if we made this offer to any other author, they'd wet themselves. And I literally told the guy, I'm like, well, then call them.
I'm not every other person.
I said, I'm making more on Amazon than you're offering me. And I don't care if your name's on my book. And I hung up.
There you go.
And 2 weeks later, they called me back. And it was that Godfather moment. They made me an offer I could not say no to.
Refuse,
And so we did a 3-book contract right out of the gate. Podium Publishing at the time, they're out of Toronto. And they're like the premier audiobook publisher, and they were going to do the audio version of Going Home. But when Penguin came around, they're like, we want the audio as well. They're like, you've got to get them to release it to us. And so I called Podium and told them what was up. And they're like, we do not want to do this. They're like, but we understand what this means for you. Right. And as we were talking before we got started about creators being used by the industries.
Like we were talking before we recorded.
This really made a statement about Podium to me. About their morals. They're like, we know that this is a big deal for you. We know you need this. And so they didn't give it to them. They did sell it to them for $30,000, which I thought was hilarious. They sold the audio rights. And so I did the 3 books and it was going great. We did a contract for 2 more books. That was fantastic. And then we were negotiating to do even more. And I'll just say negotiations broke down. And so contractually, I'm obligated to negotiate with them in good faith, for contract renewal. But like I said, it broke down. They said something to me that if I'd have been in the room with the guy, he'd have got punched hard and a lot to say that to me. And I let him know that over the phone. And he asked, anyway, I'm not going to go to that, but it got interesting for a minute. But I told him, I said, I've decided to go a different direction. And I gave him a big FU and hung up. And then my knees got weak and I had to sit. I was standing on my front porch. I had to sit down on the steps. I was like, what the hell did I just do? I was like, there's a lot of zeros in that number, man. I mean,
but you got, your inner morals had
run out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just the way they treat you, like the original contract that I had with Penguin was done by a guy named Phil Budnick. And Phil, if you're out there in the world, love you, brother, and miss you. He was a great dude. He did so much to help me really get my career off the ground. I took him to a prepper event in Denver. It was the first like author event that I ever did. And they sent 600 copies of my books there to give away.
Wow.
And you would be amazed at that time how hard it was to give those books away.
Yeah. Wow.
But he's a New York City kind of guy, and he had never experienced anything like that. And he had a great time with it. And he told me, he goes, I've never had an author experience like this. Because I had my buddies, some of my boys showed up to help man this booth and make things run. And at one point we kicked Phil out of the booth and we told him, go look around. This is new to you. Go check this stuff out. He's like, what? I got it. No, we don't need to be here. Matter of fact, we don't want you here. Go away. You know, we had to make him leave. And we stayed good friends the whole time.
Yeah.
So after that happened, the same day, I'm about 2 hours, really, really coincidentally, about 2 hours later, I get a call from Podium Publishing. And they're like, hey, man, you know, we really regret selling your audio away. It was one of the biggest mistakes we've ever made. And they're like, if we can ever work together again in the future, we want to. And I was like, well, it's funny you should call today. And I told them what I just did. And they're like, we'll send you a contract right now. Yeah. And I was like, well, hold on, man. I said, so we can't change narrators, because the readers of this series and the listeners, and there's probably more listeners even than readers, and there's a big crossover. People will buy the physical copy as well as the audio. I said, you know, they love this narrator, and he was a great dude. Yeah. And they're like, oh, that's not a problem. We'll get him. And I was like, well, look, I've spent enough time in the contract world. I know if it's not in black and white, it didn't happen. So
correct.
And they're like, yeah. So they're like, well, we can't negotiate with him without a contract from you. And I was like, okay, go ahead and do the contract, but put a 72-hour sunset clause in there. If you don't get him, our contract's void.
Right.
And they're like, done. And by the time I walked into my office and sat down, the email was there. I printed it, signed it, scanned it, sent it back to them. And they called me at 10 a.m. the next morning and said, he's in, we're good. Yeah. And they have been fantastic to me. I can't sing the praises of Podium Publishing enough. Sure. They really are good people. Yeah. And I give them some grief, and I know I'm probably one of their thorns in their side. I just, you know, I don't like big business.
You got to have people like that, because if you don't, then they walk all over people.
Yeah. So. But yeah, so from there, I ventured into the world of self-publishing and had to figure it all out. And even then, you know, I was putting these books out and it was doing extremely well. But even then, I really wasn't taking it serious. I was still working. I mean, I didn't quit my job for another 4 years. Yeah. After all this was going on, I actually quit my job to go alone, because I'm like, I don't need this job. I loved my job. It was a fantastic company, family owned. They treated us great. And so I, you know, didn't really want to leave it. But eventually I was like, yeah, all right. I left it because I told them, I said, you're not getting your money's worth out of me anymore. It's just, you're just not. And I'm telling you to your face. And so I can't, in good faith, continue to take it from you.
I get that.
So, but under Penguin, I hit the USA Today bestsellers list twice, qualified for the New York Times, who said flatly that they would never list me, no matter what I wrote, which I took as a good mark. I'll take that badge. Thank you.
So as a political decision.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. That's, you know, newspapers, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, doesn't matter. Newspapers, television stations, you know, they're going to slant it the way they want to slant it. Yeah. And that doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
And it's, they're a dying breed, newspapers too. That's the thing they don't understand. It's like publishers, like the big publishers, and 10 more years, they're not going to exist. You know, we don't need them no more. The difference in royalty that I get paid by a publisher versus self-publishing is 5 to 8 times.
Wow.
Yeah. The only thing the traditional publisher gets you is on the bookshelf of bookstores, which is also going the way of the dinosaurs.
Right. Exactly.
About the only thing a publisher could do for you is get you to Hudson News at the airports, you know, because that's a great way to sell books, you know, so they can pull that off for you. Right. But that's a hard slot to get. I mean, Penguin did do a special edition for Walmart where we ran about 15,000 units through like super quick. Sure. And then that was it. And I was like, well, that was successful. Let's do it again. They're like, nah, we're not going to do it again. I'm like, well, why not? You know? Right. So, but yeah. That's great. So now I do it myself. I've learned some lessons. I take it serious now. I've hired a very professional firm to do my editing, because the editing was rough in some of them. And I've hired a professional firm so I'm delivering a much better product. I put a lot more effort into it.
Sure.
And you know, and I try to be very accessible to people too. You know, if they reach out, I answer all my own social media questions. My own posts. I finally did sign with a manager after she contacted me, and I waited 2 years before I signed with her. And I should have signed the night she called me because she is fantastic.
Yeah.
But it's been interesting. It's you know, people ask me advice all the time on writing, and a lot of guys reach out to me like, "Hey man, would you read my stuff?" And I'm like, well, "I'll try, bro, but I can't make no promises. I'm busy. I'm a busy guy." But I tell them, don't look to me as an example. I said, what happened to me was like getting struck by lightning. You know, don't expect that. You know, I didn't expect it. You know, so don't look to me.
Talk about. I mean, you just said something, you know, that really hit me, and this was exactly what Don McLean, when I interviewed him, you know, talked about American Pie, and you know, it was 8 minutes and 30 seconds long, and you know, producers wanted to cut it down to like 3 or 4 minutes, and he's like, "No, go pound sand. You know, I'm gonna do it the way this is my art. You know, don't screw with my art." And so he stuck with it, and eventually, I mean, obviously became one of the 5 top songs of all time. And but you also did not, you know, cave in to a publisher, a big publisher, hung up on them, and you know, they knew what they lost. But that's from, I mean, listeners out there, it's good, you know, advice, because you might regret, you know, when the smoke settles, you might regret it, but overall it's gonna benefit you in the end, because that is who you are. That's your art, and you can't let anybody dictate to you either what your art's worth or what your art, you know, who it goes to and who buys it. And you know, it's to me, that was very poignant when you said that, because I think strong artists like yourself, I mean, you know, they don't put up with any BS from the big guys, the big boys, right?
Yeah, no, and I'll give you another little example of that, directly to the point you're talking about. When I first signed with Penguin, the first book, in the first opening chapters, there's a scene where the main character shoots somebody, and Penguin came to me and said, "You need to modify this because he's the good guy and he shoots this guy who's unarmed." And I'm like, "He's not unarmed. He's wearing a pistol, clearly. And he even raises his shirt to show that he's wearing a pistol."
Yeah.
And I said, and in this world that this story is set in, second place is the first loser. There is no second place.
Yeah.
You know, you're either first or you're dead.
Right.
And they argued, and I finally said, I will go as far, because even in the first book, the guy didn't even, or in the first edition, the guy didn't even raise his shirt. I said, I will go so far as to have him raise his shirt to display a weapon before he gets killed. Because they're like, "Oh, you got to make the bad guy punch him first, or he's got to do." I'm like, no. Words are enough. And that's one thing that people don't understand in today's society. You know, there are people that like to say words, you know, have power, and words are this and that. But they truly don't, because on social media and things like that, people will say things on those platforms to people that they would never say in front of them, at least to people like me, because I'm one of them old school guys. If you insult me, I'm going to let you know you've insulted me. And if you won't retract that, we're going to deal with it one way or another, you know, because I'm not going to insult. I'm a very conflict guy. I'm into de-escalation and avoidance at all costs, because I have seen conflict, the aftermath, the distribution of it and stuff. Yeah. So I don't like to do that. And I think people need to learn a little more civility, and we would all be in a better place.
100%. It's getting out of hand right now. I mean, it's been out of hand, but it's getting worse and worse and worse. And, you know, you know, you see it on the news every day. You watch it, and I'm like, oh my, unbelievable what turns into, you know, violence. I mean, it doesn't have to, you know, like yourself, I'm a de-escalation guy too. I used to teach it.
Well, and some people thrive on applying violence to others, because most people, number one, don't know how to react when violence is applied to them, you know, and they're not prepared for it, and they're
freeze or whatever.
Ill-equipped. Well, you hear freeze, you know, or fight, flight, fight or flight. Yeah. Well, you said it right though. Freeze is the third step there. It's actually the middle one. It's fight, flight, freeze, or flight, fight, freeze.
Right.
And a lot of people will freeze. And I've seen countless scenarios where people lost their lives because they simply stood there.
The Buffalo supermarket situation, all those people froze.
Yeah, and they stood there. And if they would have simply engaged their feet, like I don't walk into a building without having an idea of where the back exit is.
Always.
Not even the front door.
I walk in, yeah.
If my wife and I go out to eat, she knows that I'm going to sit facing the door.
Correct.
I'm not going to have my back to it. I'm going to sit facing. And people are like, "Oh, you're crazy." No, I'm not. I mean, this is the world we live in. This isn't the world I created. I'm simply reacting to the stimulus applied to me. Correct. So I'm going to see people as they come through the door. I'm not going to be sitting with my back to it. No.
Yeah,
when I'm pumping gas,
nothing's going to happen. But you know what? That one option, the one chance it's going to happen. I'm going to be ready for it. Yeah,
yeah. It's like my good buddy Alan Kay has always said: if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
Right.
So
you stay ready. Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk about your new work and what people can expect, because this is engaging. I love this conversation that we're having, and it's just fascinating to me to talk to you. So tell our listeners how they can get your work and get your new work and all that, because I want all my listeners to go buy your stuff.
Well, I hope they do. I will be the first to profess that I'm not a very good writer. And I say this in just about every interview I do. I am a storyteller.
Yeah, storyteller.
And I will say this: I'm a damn good storyteller too. I can spin a yarn, as it were. And I enjoy doing it. I love it. So, I mean, you can get. I'm sorry, I was thinking of something else, got sidetracked. But you can get the books on Amazon. That's the best place. They're on Audible for audio as well as iTunes. I think most of them are now. We will be moving things so that we get even distribution, because there's some clunky things that happened in the past, and we're rectifying that. So they'll be available everywhere. And I've got the website at Angry American, ANGERY American.com. That's my site.
Okay. I'll put that on our social media.
Yeah. And I'm on all the socials, but Amazon and Audible really is the place to get them right now. I am beginning to explore the idea of leaving Amazon, and doing my own distribution as well. Because again, it's that I don't like to be beholden to anybody, and they could decide to take my books down for sale if they want to.
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen. On my website, we're getting ready to go through the second iteration, the update of the website. And we're trying to find a way that I can stream my own video, things like this podcast, my life on my own site. And I'm not having to use social media sites to do it.
Yeah.
But it's extremely expensive. But I'm trying to figure out how to do it. So, but the series, the first book, Going Home, is just that. It's this trip home.
Right.
And I never planned more than that. So subsequently I wrote, all right, he got home in this world of basically being thrown in the 1800s overnight. What's that look like? And how do you deal with it? And being in the survival space for as long as I have, I've learned a great deal of things. And I'm also by trade a heavy industrial electrician. I built power plants for many years around this country.
Wow.
I worked for power companies all over this country. I was a kind of a troubleshooter guy that would come in when there were problems. Yeah. I was QA QC startup on power plants, which means I'm the guy to turn it on for the first time.
Wow.
On that team. And so I have a very intimate understanding of power distribution, transmission, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I had a very good viewpoint on that world of which to speak on it. And so that's just what I started doing. And mixing with that, what I'd learned over those 40 years, or, whatever it was, 30 years back then, compiling those things and putting those solutions into the books. And it's crazy, some of the things that catches the reader's attention.
Yeah.
I did
it's probably the things that you probably wouldn't expect, right?
Yeah. Like one of the things they talk about the most is what I call the gut bucket chicken feeder. Right. And it's a 5-gallon bucket with holes drilled in the bottom of it, simply suspended in the air. And you throw meat scraps or carcasses of animals in there, and the flies will land and they will lay eggs, and the maggots will crawl around and they'll fall out of the holes in the bottom. And the chickens are just standing down there looking up and waiting.
Oh,
so
wow.
And it works. You just got to dump the bones out of there now and then and put fresh stuff in there, but it'll produce chicken food for you.
What I heard today, Chris, and you can answer this for me real quick. Sorry to cut you off, but
you're fine, man.
It's about maggots.
Yeah.
I heard today, this morning, that maggots have qualities of actually making your skin, like eating dead skin, and and making your skin good and in healing wounds and so forth.
Yes.
I
Well,
didn't
it
realize
was,
that.
yeah, maggot therapy is exactly what that's called.
Okay.
It was used in the past, and it can still be used if you are in a very isolated, austere condition and you've got a severe open wound. Yeah, you can expose it to flies, allow the maggots to form, cover them with something to keep them in there, and because they don't eat live flesh, they eat dead flesh.
Okay.
So they will eat all the dead flesh that needed to be debrided from that wound anyway,
Right.
and it'll prevent infection.
Wow.
And when people hear that, they're like, "Oh, that's disgusting. I would never let that happen." But okay, what else are you going to do? Go septic and die out here
Die of
miserably?
infection. Yeah.
No, I'm gonna get some flies on me and let them do their thing, and go to work, and then mix that in with some herbal, depending on the region where I'm at, the various herbs that are out there and things that I can harvest. Honey, pack it with sugar. That's an old treatment even for a wound. Is just to pack it with sugar, put honey on it, which is antimicrobial, antibacterial.
Yeah.
So there's lots of things you can do.
Sure. That's crazy. That's amazing. And it's fascinating because, it sounds to the average person it's gross, but when you're in a survival mode, you have to do what you got to do to stay alive, and you're going to do it if you're in, right. Cause you might have this vision in your head, but when you're in that position and you know what you have to do, you're going to do it.
Well, there's the thing. You have to be willing to make a decision and then act upon that decision. A lot of people will analysis through paralysis is what we say, or paralysis to analysis is one of the things we say. They'll think too hard, too long, too much. And sometimes it's just like, I need to make a quick decision. I need to act upon that, and I need to get moving. And like what we say is, like, what's going to kill me first? I'm going to address that issue. Once that issue is addressed, what's the next thing that's going to kill me? Now I'm going to address that issue. And that's just how we go through it. I don't worry about everything. I worry about this thing. I accomplish this thing, and then I will move on to the next one.
Sure.
And being prepared to make that decision and act is the hard part.
Right.
That's the hard part. Yeah. So it goes back to the military even. There's a thing called the OODA loop. It's observe, orient, decide,
exactly.
And act.
OODA loop.
Act is the last thing. You have to act.
Well, that's how we teach de-escalation. The OODA loop is part of our training. And we have Marines come in and do this training, and then we videotape it, and then we do we pass it down to other people that need the training. Especially in this day and age when you could be just you and somebody out on a stranded highway, and where you don't have a weapon, and the only thing you can do is de-escalate a situation. If you don't have those tools, even as an average person, you could lose your life easily if you're not prepared, right?
Very quickly. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure, Chris. I just can't thank you enough for being on my show, and just fascinating work that just being a survivalist for 40 years and writing this amazing work, and just much success to you in the future, and always welcome on my show anytime. And
I appreciate that. I really do. Thanks for having me. You've got an interesting take on things, and this has been I've done several like this in the last couple of days, and I really enjoyed talking with you in particular. Not that I didn't enjoy the other guys, but this has been a lot of fun actually for me. And I'd love to come back, and we're going to push this out everywhere too. We want everybody to see what you do and who you are. I believe in reciprocity. I'm one of those a rising tide lifts all ships guys. I'm not trying to just do me. I'm trying to help everybody around me at the same time if I can.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I have one last question, and I ask this to everybody. When it's all said and done, Chris, when it's a twilight of your life, your career, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to leave behind to everybody, like your fans and so forth, your family and your friends?
Being as stoic as I am, my philosophy on life is this, and you're going to get a chuckle out of it, and it's that life is a sexually transmitted disease with a 100% fatality rate. Nobody gets out alive.
Correct.
Okay. I don't even think of that or consider it, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't think about my legacy. I think about what I'm doing now and how I can impact those around me. I don't worry about the things that I can have no impact on, and I try to be proactive in the places I can. And I think I will be remembered for that. There's a lot of people out there that know me, that think positive of me. There's probably some that don't, but on the whole, there's more positive thinkers out there than negative people. And I just think I'll be remembered for that. The guy that could tell a good story and was always there to lend a hand when asked. And I've done it for readers. I've assisted them when they're in a financial bind. Just not that they asked me to. Just I have a tight relationship with a lot of them. Just even through social media, I may have never met them, but I talk to them frequently, often. Lots of them have my personal cell phone number. I throw events at my own house where I invite my readers to come and hang out. I'll let them crash on my couch.
That's
I'll
awesome.
crash on their couch. Yeah, I'm easy. And I hopefully that's what I remember. That I was always there to lend a hand, and I never did anyone wrong. That's a thing that means a lot to me too. That I never cheated nobody or anything like that. So because I don't. So
yeah, it's a great answer. I love to hear that. And again, just fascinating talking to you. And like I said, best of luck to you. And have a great rest of the winter.
Yeah.
Where you're going
Man, I
next,
live in Florida, dude. Winter. Nah.
I used to live in Claremont, Florida for 8 years. So I'm very familiar with Central Florida.
Well, I live in Umatilla in Lake
Gainesville.
County. If you lived in Claremont, we were probably neighbors. I live in Lake County up in Umatilla. So where the books are set. My books are Umatilla. The books are set there. The books are set in Umatilla and Lake County.
Leesburg.
Mount Dora, Leesburg.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was down in Claremont, but I had friends in Lady Lake, so I was always up and down 27.
Yeah.
My good friend, my best friend, lives in Eustis right now. So
really, just up the road from me.
Familiar with that part, and that's what I liked about that area was I grew up in Minnesota, but it reminded me with the lakes and the pine trees, and it reminded me of being back home. It was Florida without being always Florida.
Yeah.
With the exception of the snakes and the alligators.
Yeah. And Florida Man. Don't forget Florida Man. Give him his credit. He works hard at that. So
that's right.
But yeah, I love that area. Sadly, now the growth is exploding.
It's too much. Yeah.
I bought my place on 5 acres with a pole barn and a barn and all the stuff on it for $100,000 cash in 2014. Right when I was getting ready to go on a loan. We were actually living in South Carolina. And I told my wife, I'm like, we need to move back to Florida because we don't have a tight enough tribe up here for me to know that you're going to be okay while I'm gone. And I had that in Florida and a few other places, but we moved back to Florida. And I bought a house that her uncle had purchased, my wife's uncle had purchased right across the street from him. He just bought it because he didn't want no one else to live there. And he's like, well, I'll sell it to you. And I was like, all right, cool. So we just did quick claim, 100 grand
transaction.
That thing's worth $385,000 now because of just what's happening around me.
It's booming. And when I first moved into just to give you an idea, when I moved into Claremont 2003, I went down to Lake Minnehaha, which is I think the big lake down in Claremont downtown. So I go down there, I walk down the dock, and just remember there was a Kmart and a 7-Eleven, and that whole 50 was almost nothing, right?
And the Citrus Tower.
So I go down to my first people I met. I go down to the dock and I walk down, and these guys are catfishing, right? So they take like these pellets. I don't know what kind of food it was. It was these little pellets, and they threw it in the water, and they start stamping on the dock. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, we're trying to attract the catfish. I'm like, okay. So the one guy's name was Gator. Next guy was Buckshot. so my first two buddies in Claremont were Gator and Buckshot. They used to hunt pigs, wild pigs were over by the Kmart.
You can't get any more Florida than that. I mean, that is pure Florida right there. It
is pure Florida. And I miss that. But I miss it, but I don't, because I know what it's like. I mean, I know how grown it's been and how built up, and it looks nothing like when I first moved there.
And how hot it is in the summer. I'm you can tell by looking at me, I'm built for cold weather. I'm not a hot weather guy, but I was born and raised in Florida. I've lived around the country. I've lived in Wyoming twice. I've lived in the Carolinas, New Hampshire. I've lived all over the place, but I keep coming back to the swamps of Florida because that's just home.
That's who you are. My son lives in Davenport to this day. Like right now, he works at Disney. He lives in Davenport. So, but again, I won't take more of your time up, but
no problem.
But man, thank you so much, and best to you. And like I said, if you ever want to come back, just come on back.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk some more. And the same to you, man. Nothing but success. I hope that the worst day of 2024 is better than the best day of 2023 for you.
Thank you. Yeah, we need it. My wife and I've been through a lot the last year, so thank you for that, man.
Yeah, for sure, brother.
Good vibes to you too. See you, man.
Take care.